I've been asking myself a question lately, probably for the last 2 or 3 months. And the question is this: how much is enough? How much is enough? And I'm just still pondering it. How much is enough? But I want to share some thoughts about how much is enough, because I'm sure Abby and Joel have all sorts of desires for their beautiful girls, and I'm sure one of those would be that they would be happy. You've already said you've named it that. And of course, everybody is chasing after our own vision of happiness. But it turns out many of the things we think will make us happy don't quite deliver. Jesus made some really bold claims that turn our vision of what we think might be happy on its head. He said things like the last will be first and the first will be last. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Bless those who curse you. He said all sorts of things that were very counterintuitive and countercultural. But one of the most counterintuitive of all Jesus' teachings is his teaching on generosity. And really, this, just for those of you here, this is really part one of a 2-part thing, and I'm going to do the second part on Wednesday night, at a meeting that we're having. But in Acts 20, verse 35, Jesus says this: "It is more blessed to give than to receive." And that word blessed is makarios. It means happy, fortunate, well off. In order, according to Jesus, to be happy is to give, not to receive. And it's easy to think that kind of like, oh yeah, that sounds good, but then you know that actually very few people actually live that way. But what's fascinating is that all the research from social science has shown that Jesus is exactly right. Generous people, according to the research, are happier, they are healthier, they have lower levels of depression and anxiety, they are more interested in personal growth, they have better relationships, they have a higher life expectancy, and they literally laugh more. So according to all the studies that you can get around, those who are generous, those who literally live out this idea of giving rather than receiving, end up better people. And this is true across every demographic, no matter somebody's socioeconomic status, age, gender, ethnicity, personality. It just works. In fact, one study called the link between generosity and happiness a universal feature of human psychology. So if Abby and Joel, as I know they do, want to bring their little ladies up to be happy, one of the things they will need to instill in them is a heart of generosity. And not just in money, of course, but in all things. So one of the things Jesus said about this is this: do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I find it interesting that he knows we'll want to store up treasure. It's all right, it's just a baby, it's fine. You've seen one before. You see, he doesn't say anything about not storing up treasure. He doesn't say you shouldn't store up treasure. He knows there's something in our hearts that wants to store, that wants to build, that wants to collect, that wants to accumulate. There's something in our hearts that just causes us to want to accumulate all the time. So he doesn't say don't accumulate, don't store up, don't collect, don't draw in. He just says, look, depending on what you accumulate and how you accumulate, that's going to make a difference. He suggests we probably store it up in the wrong place, on earth and in heaven. And heaven here does not mean the place where you go when you die. This is a first century Hebrew way of saying in God and what he about on the earth. But one of his main insights is this: where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You see, we think it's the opposite. We think our money follows our heart. So we think, generally, that we spend money on those things we love and care about. So we go our heart, and our money follows our heart. But Jesus says, maybe not. Because it also works both ways, because we also come to love, worry about, and obsess over what we spend our money on. One of the fascinating things about the social science study of money is that there is a link between happiness and money up to a certain point. So if you earn about £10,000 in this country, you will be happier if you then earn £50,000, for example. But if you then earn £500,000, there's very little difference in happiness between 50 grand and £500,000. And if you go bigger than that, happiness goes down because you are now neurotic about losing it all. So there is a place where, yes, being able to pay your bills easily, being able to enjoy what you would like, yes, it helps. But there is a limit on that, psychologically. So I've been pondering this question of enough. What is enough? And it's a big question with no easy answers, but I'm enjoying chewing it over. In this little teaching that Jesus does, he continues and he says this that looks a little bit strange to our Western minds. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your body will be full of darkness. Now, healthy is a figure of speech in Jesus' day. Healthy implies generous, and unhealthy implies stingy. So it's a way of saying, look, there's two different ways of looking at the world that we would call an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset. I want you to think of how you see the world. Is the world an abundant place, full of goodness? Or is the world a scarce place? See, if you have an abundant mindset, you look out the world and you see this world of abundance. You see God as Father, provider, you're his child, and all of life is a gift. This is Dad's world, and it's teemed with more than enough. You would, like Jesus, sit and go, look at the birds. And as a result, you live with gratitude and generosity. You receive and you give both with joy. You would, a Hebrew would say, have a healthy eye. But we live in a world that tells us it's a scarce world. We look out the world and we are told that there is lack. There is no Father provider and you're on your own. The world's a dangerous place and human civilization is a fierce battle over scarce resources, which isn't true. There are plenty of resources in the world. They're just shared out unequally. But we believe that there's scarcity, and we have to look out for number one. So our vision becomes focused on what we have, but scared of what we might lose or what we don't have and what we want, all of which means we become consumed by fear and or greed, abundance and scarcity. Two very different ways of seeing life in general. Two people can have the exact same income, cost of living, and economic responsibility, but see the world in radically different ways. You know this. You know people who have the same income and are terrified because they've only got 25 grand in the bank. And you have other people who have the same income who are very happy to just have 500 quid saved away. What is that? Well, a lot of it's to do with our past, but some of it is to do with abundance and scarcity, and whether we trust Jesus' vision of abundance. You see, if you trust his vision of abundance, it's not difficult. When he says, don't worry, seek first the kingdom, given it will be given, be generous with all what you have, well, that's a bit easier. But if we believe the world is a scarce place, and we have to scrap and strive for every little thing, then when we read Jesus' teachings, he just sounds frankly unhinged. Generosity sounds ridiculous and even dangerous. He continues, no man can serve two masters. You'll hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, sometimes you'll see in some translations, it doesn't say money, it says mammon, which is an Aramaic word. The Bible, the Gospels were written in Greek, but Jesus probably spoke Aramaic. And mammon may well have been the word that he used. And mammon was the name for the ancient Syrian god of wealth. Effectively, Jesus says, there is this thing. We really badly want to believe that money's neutral, that it's not good or bad. It's just about the heart. But Jesus says, maybe not. You see, entire sectors of our economy are run by the worship of money, mammon. Most war is about mammon. It's about money, and it's about getting more, and it's about making sure I have more than you and you have less than me. A lot of racism, ecological devastation, all the terrible things in our world, most of them come back to this sense that I need more because I don't think there is enough. And I have to stop you getting it so I can get it. This idea of mammon is not neutral. Many of us heard this many times. He says here, you cannot serve both God and mammon. Not you should not. Not you should rethink, but no, you cannot. It's not bad. It's not that it's bad, it's that it's impossible. And I know, many of us heard this many times, but the more I've thought about this, the more I've come to see just how often let's start with me, I am prone to bow low before Mammon and worship at his feet. Because Mammon will take over your heart unless you resist its gravitational pull. But here's the thing, it's already overtaken most of our hearts simply because of the culture we live in. And we are completely unaware of it. We live in a consumer culture when happiness is assumed to be gained by accumulating more things and or experiences. And if I can get the right experiences, things, then I'll be content. For now, I just want you to be aware of the possibility that we worship the accumulation of things, and money is the way to do that much more than we think. I want you to be open to the possibility that because of the cultural waters we swim in, money and the pursuit of more is much more powerful than we imagine. To show you this, let me ask you a couple of simple questions. When you last heard you had some new unexpected income, maybe a pay rise or an unexpected gift, what was your first thought about what to do with it? And for how many of you was it to get that thing you've been waiting to get? If you set a budget for something, here's a good one. Anybody else into Vinted? Yeah, a few smiles. Here's the thing. So you go, I need some jeans. They're 40 quid brand new, but if I get them Vinted for 20 quid, what's your thought about the other 20 quid? Because everybody I know says, now I can get another pair. Don't tell me we don't bow to Mammon. Tell me how many people you know went, great, now I've got 20 quid to give somewhere else. To be generous with somebody else. Now I can buy a pair of jeans for somebody else. Has anybody said that to you when they got a deal on Vinted? I do this solely to point out that we are immersed in a consumer culture that is obsessed with the accumulation of things. And that behind that accumulation of things is the thought that these things will make me happier or more content. Which we know, if you've been in church a little while, I know this, Adam. Okay, but if you knew it, your first thought would not be, I can get more things the moment you had the opportunity. So we don't know it. I don't know it. And it's killing us. You see, I think most of us would think these words of Jesus were not really applicable to us. Then he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Now, I think greed means wanting more and not being content. With everything. The weird thing about greed is very few of us think ourselves as greedy. I include me. I have heard people confess all sorts of things in my time in pastoral ministry. I mean all sorts of things about all sorts of things. I will not be shocked, I am sure, because I've heard pretty much everything. Not once in 18 years has anybody said, I have an issue with wanting more. Not once. Because we live in a culture that tells us it's normal. Completely normal. We tend to unconsciously adopt the spending norms of our culture, and we live in one of the most greedy, materialistic cultures in history. We look across the road and go, well, it's just normal. It's just normal. Okay, but normal for who? And normal compared to what? Jesus suggests that greed means we are focused on abundance of possessions. Let me ask you another question. Who has more possessions now than last year? Who has got more things in their house than last year? You see, if life does not consist in the abundance of possessions, and yet nearly everybody I know has got more possessions than last year, that doesn't really tally, does it? There's something not quite right. We live in a culture whose economy is built on buying consumer goods. And you realize I like economics because I'm a geek, but like our whole economy since about 1970, 80 is built on you buying things because we don't make anything anymore and we don't export anything anymore. The whole thing is you have to keep buying things, which is why things don't last very long. It's why fast fashion's in now because it don't last very long. It's why nothing's built to last because you have to keep buying because it's all built on sand, basically. If this country decided it was going to embrace simplicity, there'd probably be an economic crash. No, honestly, there would. There would. It's all built on you buying stuff. And this is the culture I live in. And I'm just having my eyes on it. Oh. And it doesn't do me much good. You might suggest that's not true. But I think almost everybody in this room operates from an unconscious worldview that life does consist in an abundance of things. And again, you might say, well, that's not true, but all I would need to do is walk around your house and ask what was there that wasn't there 12 months ago, or ask you to show me your various online wish lists. Because they're all the things you want, but you don't have. Almost finished. Godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world and we could take nothing out of it. But listen to this, if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. The Greek for food and clothing literally means covering. The idea, according to Paul, and I know, hey, it's the first century, it's not 21st century Shipley. But, and this is the challenge, because what does this look like in 21st century Shipley? And this is why it's not easy. But here's what I think. If you said to Jesus, do you think I've got enough? I think he'd say, maybe a little bit less. I doubt he'd say, oh yeah, go and get some more. The idea is as long as we have the basics and as long as we have God and each other, that's enough. But here's my question, to me as much as anyone else, is it? Is that enough? Would it be enough? And what is enough? And why am I so good at justifying that I need more? Because I'm really good at it. And so are you. That's why you keep buying stuff. The author Randy Alcorn defines contentment as this: being satisfied in whose you are, who you are, and what you have. That sounds like happiness. Being content in whose you are, who you are, and what you have. G.K. Chesterton once said, there are two ways to get enough. One is to continue to accumulate more and more. The other is to desire less. Or to put it another way, there are two ways to be rich. Earn more and more, or want less and less. One is easier and more guaranteed than the other. Remember where we started. All the evidence suggests that some of the most happiest people are some of the most generous people. We have been sold a lie that happiness lies in the abundance of our possessions. And as I look around, I see most of us, including me, fall for it big time. It's very challenging to live a generous life if you're constantly battling the greed in your heart for more. We don't call it greed, of course. We make it more palatable. We call it living a normal life or a middle-class life. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But if we are serious about living the life of Jesus, then maybe you're the one who can break the rule and you can have loads of stuff and still it'd be all right with it. Or maybe you're not. Whatever we call it, I find it very difficult to deny that deep within me, there's an insatiable desire for more, and it is never satisfied. So perhaps it needs killing off. Perhaps as imitators and followers of Jesus, we might need to ponder what enough is and what dealing with the God of Mammon might look like. We'll talk about that on Wednesday night for those of you here, and I'll be sharing my journey to the point I'm at now and what it looks like for me, because I've gone on a massive journey and shift on this stuff. But in that scripture, Paul says, we will be content. The Greek word implies a resolve of heart to be happy with what we have. And elsewhere in his writings, Paul says he has learned to be content. It was clearly a journey for him of moving towards greater contentment. As for me, I am greatly desiring to learn more and more, to be satisfied in whose I am, who I am, and what I have. And the path to do that is learning to live a life of generosity. And what that looks like is what I'll share on Wednesday. But back to Amelia and Erin to close. They live in a world that yells at them every day that if they build up an abundance of possessions, they will be happy. And it's very tempting as a parent to want to give them everything they need. Need in inverted commas. It's very tempting. But a much better way to parent than to provide an abundance of possessions would be to create a home where extravagant generosity was the norm. Generosity of time, generosity of grace, generosity of kindness, generosity of forgiveness, as well as generosity of finance. Because in the end, it really is more blessed to give than to receive. But perhaps we've got some work to do on our hearts, as I do, to move to that place. But I would encourage Abby and Joel, as I would everybody else in their relationships. Generosity of heart breeds happiness. What might it mean to be generous where you are today? Amen. Amen.